Hi everybody, my name is Justin Lake and this is my highlight video for the practicum for AEP 879. Before I even get into these district activities, I just want to talk about what I think was the most important thing for me. I took all my courses from 2017 to 2019, then we had a baby, then COVID happened, something had to give, it was grad school, so I took a break. Um, the annotated bibliography was one of the best refreshers ever. Just everything that I learned in all of our coursework came straight back into my head, and I'm so thankful for it. Nobody likes a bibliography. I hated it. It was the last thing I did for this thing, but gosh darn it, it was beneficial, and I appreciate it at the end of the day. Um, Another thing to state now is that this this program is fantastic because as soon as I was done with my coursework, I took the principal test for the state of Missouri and passed it as well back in 2020, right after I was done with it. So um, it was really nice to have the bibliography to refresh my brain, but I also just want to acknowledge the program and how good it is because I have already passed that test in the state that I'm going to be certified in. So let's talk about my district level activities. The biggest highlight was probably proposing and eventually passing a tax levy uh, to fund needs for the school district that we didn't have money for. Um, and we got it passed, and it funded a full-time SRO for our district. It added a fax class that was previously there that was eliminated at some point before I got there, and it was something that the community wanted to come back. So we were able to get money to pay a fax teacher and create a new position. Um, it created more money for our budget for our buses that we own, and we don't outsource, and more budget for our HVAC systems for the entire school. More money into the annual maintenance budget for the school, and it added to the base salary, and then it also added money for each step you went up on the salary for teachers, and it also increased our health benefits as well as educators. So the tax levy was something I was super proud of, and it was incredibly educational to learn about that and kind of think of schools on the bigger level as opposed to the district level as opposed to just teaching in your classroom. The other thing that I think I was most proud of on the district was on the superintendent advisory committee. I had a special role. It involved all stakeholders. It had business owners in the community. It had parents in the community. It had one teacher from each school, elementary, high school, middle school. It had board members on it. It had classified staff on it. It had, you know, literally every stakeholder. High school students were on it. So I was not on this committee until I told my superintendent that I was going through the program, and he asked me to join, and he would create a role for me. And I had a unique position because I taught 2 hours of high school weights, and the rest of the day I taught elementary PE. So I had a perspective from two different schools, and I could see issues differently than if I was just an elementary teacher or just a high school teacher. I had a different perspective, and I think it was valued and important for that committee on some of the decisions we made as far as funding and other things like that. My other role on that committee was to be the athletics um, advocator. Our athletic director couldn't be on the committee because our meetings were at 4:30 right before the board meetings, and he was obviously setting up for games and stuff like that. So I was the voice for all of the athletic programs. Um, One thing I advocated for was facility upgrades. Our locker rooms are garbage for football, for track, for wrestling, um, and we also our football lights were terrible. We had to start games at 6 o'clock because if it got too dark, we couldn't see. Our players couldn't see. So I was a big advocate for facility upgrades for athletics, because I think athletics are important in education, because I think athletics and success in athletics can change perception of the school within our own community and outside of the community. Whether that's fair or not, it's the truth. If you open Facebook or you open the newspaper and you see such and such high school just won again, look, they keep winning, blah, 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 blah. In your mind, or in those people's minds, that school is good. On top of that, the more kids that are involved in extracurricular activities, whether it be sports, band, choir, dance, FFA, I don't care what it is, when you're involved in something else other than just your classwork, you are more committed to your education because you are held to a higher standard. There's somebody else there. You have your coach, you have your FFA leader, you have your band director, your choir director, making sure you're at school every day so you don't miss practice, making sure you're completing your schoolwork and getting good grades so you can maintain eligibility. Extracurriculars matter. And while I was on this committee, I advocated for facility upgrades in our football locker room, wrestling room, track locker room. All got upgraded. We got lights on the football field, brand new lights. We got lights on softball and baseball fields that didn't have lights at all previously, which is ridiculous because our softball team won state and got second in state while I was at this place. And then they got second again this year. So, it's a great program. But those baseball and softball games all had to happen right after school at like 4:30 because we didn't have any lights. It's ridiculous. So by making kids and the community think that we care about sports, you get more kids to participate in them. And the more kids that you get to participate in extracurriculars, the better they perform in the classroom as well. I'm going to move on to the elementary now. I was blessed to have maybe the best principal in the history of the world. He immediately had me join PLCs with classroom teachers because he told me from his experience, he was like, hey, man, I used to be an elementary PE teacher. I didn't know how much went in to school until, it was kind of too late and I was in it. He was like, you need to be in these PLCs. You need to understand data collection. You need to understand how we use data and how classroom teachers change and implement strategies and instructions to increase student performance. And he was like, he's like, it's not your fault. He's like, but you don't know what it is. So, and he was right. So I got to help lead those grade level PLCs and be a part of collecting, analyzing, interpreting data, figuring out new strategies of how to instruct and teach things to students to where we can get, better academic achievement. And that was incredibly beneficial to me to see the school world outside of the gym, outside of the health room, and outside of the weight room. Another thing that principal that I had allowed me to do, anytime he was gone, I was acting principal. I handled discipline of students. Not necessarily discipline of staff, but I was there to reinforce expectations among the staff, and they were well aware of it. Obviously, I had to talk to parents, tough decisions about things that their kids did, discipline type stuff, and communicating with the community. Anybody who came in and had questions and wanted to talk, I had to come in there. They would have somebody come cover my room. It's kind of mind-boggling how much stuff a principal has to deal with during a day, because there would be some days where I would still just teach PE all day and I would just get called into the office to go handle some discipline issues, and there'd be some days where I would not be in my gym at all and somebody else would have to be teaching PE because I was dealing with people from the community, I was dealing with upset parents, I was dealing with discipline of students, watching video from the bus of kids getting in a fight, blah, 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 all sorts of random stuff. And all those hours that I got being acting principal were incredibly valuable for me in the future. Um, let's see. Now I'm going to move on to the secondary. So my secondary principal, my high school principal, he basically created a position for me of leadership to be the secondary PLC leader for all physical education and health. It's not something we had before. It was not aligned. It was not, everybody could do kind of whatever they wanted as long as state standards were covered. But we didn't have a plan together, a uniformed plan. And so when I was there, we essentially streamlined and made everything to where this is what we want in seventh grade PE, this is what we want in eighth grade PE, so they're ready for ninth grade, PE and blah blah blah, and the skills and everything that's expected of them. Same thing with health. Our health classes, we had a bunch of kids who were not getting good grades in health, and I think health was an issue because we were using, when we showed up, whoever was there before us left their stuff behind, and that's what everybody used just to teach health. Well, that's lazy and that's stupid, and it didn't work because we didn't have engagement. We didn't have kids who were working hard, so we essentially, I wouldn't say we changed the curriculum. We just had to change plans and lessons on how we wanted to teach health and how to make it more engaging and how kids could understand it more and want to be more involved. Another big thing for us was we noticed that our kids were lacking in the weight room. Our kids were smaller, slower. They didn't look as jacked as the opponents on the athletic field. Didn't matter the sport. And we needed to find ways to get better in the weight room. And one thing that we noticed was we needed more resources. So we did a 50-50 raffle. We organized a fundraiser for, it was at basketball games, a 50-50 raffle to get money for the weight room that generated $800. And some of it was safety involved. Like in this picture, you can see that clamp the guy is putting on the weights. We didn't have clamps. We didn't have that stuff. So A, it wasn't safe in our weight room. And B, we just didn't have the resources. We needed more dumbbells. We needed more plates. We needed all sorts of stuff. And while $800 isn't a ton when it comes to weight room equipment, it still made a big difference in the success of our students. I would say that another huge thing as far as being the PE PLC leader, we had to address locker room management. It's a sticky area. The locker room can be a dangerous place. There's people who use drugs in there. There's people who bully people in there, assault people. There's lots of stuff can go on in a locker room. And there's lots of laws and regulations and policies that we have in our school that we had to implement, and we all had to be on the same page. And that's something that I made very clear to our group, that we had expectations and a protocol for everything, and we had to follow it. I've had to deal with sexual harassment, alcohol use, drug dealing, all in the locker room while I was in charge of my weights class. And there's certain protocols. I can't just go grab kids' backpack and start looking through it. There's certain rights and privileges and people that need to be involved in that process. But we educated our staff on all of that as well. When it comes down to it, I think the most important part of all of this for me was the experience, that I got from being on the superintendent advisory committee, getting the principal time for the elementary, PLC time for the elementary, and PLC time for secondary, but also that bibliography. That bibliography made a huge difference in my education, and I'm so glad that You made me do it, Dr. Moody.